Thanks. So we have plenty of time for questions, so hopefully we'll get around to many of you. Are there any initial first questions? Yes, up the back.
Hello, Riz. I'm Aslom. Given that UMNO is playing racial cards during the election and after the election, do you think UMNO is getting stronger or weaker, especially among the Malays? Thank you.
As I said, I give you this example I mentioned just now. The High Court decided in 2010 that the Home Minister's decision to ban the word Allah was unconstitutional. She granted an order of certiorari. The furor that followed, the church burnings, and then the desecration of the mosques. There were calls for demonstrations outside the National Mosque in Kuala Lumpur and another mosque in Kampung Baru after Friday prayers. Now, we sent our own operators to see how that panned out. And what happened was this. Those urging the protest were castigated by the Malays who were coming up after their prayers to say, do not embarrass us and do not embarrass Islam. Now, what I'm trying to point out to you is this. UMNO has lost much of the support of the urban Malay. They continue to hold the Malays in the heartlands by continuing to keep them in that impoverished condition, because then they are beholden. It's interesting when you have the recent Hari Raya, the fast, after the fast, and you have all these politicians, UMNO politicians going to the villages to celebrate. They will say, all praise is due to Allah and UMNO. All praise is due to Allah and UMNO. And when you have politician after politician after politician coming to the same village and saying the same thing, it becomes the truth after a while. So, back to your question, they are losing their grip. They are losing their grip, but at the same time, year-end, we are expecting a redelineation exercise, and there is extreme concern as to how they will redraw lines. So even as they lose strength here, they will redraw lines. But again, they are slowly losing their grip on the Malays.
Two small points. UMNO has a way of taking people like Chandra Muzaffar and Rajapetra Kumarudin, you just mentioned your friend. Where has he gone and why? And the second point, you didn't say anything about Abu's stand or vis-a-vis DAP or PAS. How do your aspirations differ from theirs?
Okay, Chandra Muzaffar, you're not asking me to touch on Chandra Muzaffar and Rajapetra, right?
Yeah.
This is a concern, a genuine concern we have. Pakatan Rakyat is, at least at this point in time, a marriage of convenience. You have DAP and PAS really fundamentally so different that so often, I mean, we saw that it's so easy to rattle them. I think it was last year when someone threw this question about making hudud law, the law of Kelantan. And then the question was thrown to Anwar. And Anwar's response was, well, my personal view is it's okay for them to implement it. And then Guanding, of course, had to react and say, Pakatan will not countenance this. And Hadi Awang then gets into the fray. You can see how it's seemingly quite brittle. There is this concern. Abu's position is this. UMNO must go. UMNO must go. I am not there to endorse Pakatan. And I have said this again and again. In fact, in our rallies leading up to GE13, Pakatan Rakyat had made a pledge. They would give us reforms within 100 days. My contention was, that's unrealistic. I said, we'll give you 200 days. But if you do not deliver us those reforms, get ready to see us on the streets. In short, We are voting you not because we love you. You have not done enough to endear yourselves to us. We vote you simply because UMNO cannot be given the mandate anymore. Now, DAP PAS, I work with the PAS leaders simply because we must endure each other for now. I will be the first to say that on many aspects, perhaps, of the fundamentals of Islam, we do not see eye to eye. But at this juncture, my concern is the 40% who are marginalized. And if it means that I need to work with PAS and DAP, I've got no problems with DAP. Now the other thing, of course, is the paranoia is if PAS gets into the corridors of power in Putrajaya, are they a stone's throw away from implementing hudud or achieving their aspirations of establishing an Islamic state? It's theoretically possible, but it can never happen. It can never happen for the simple reason. Every incremental seat PAS takes, UMNO loses one. It's impossible, therefore, for them to get enough. You would need 142 in order to make the necessary constitutional amendments to change the structure so that it has the semblance of the Constitution of Pakistan. So, in that regard, I do not have concerns about PAS being a component in Pakatan, and where we view Pakatan, at least in the short term, as the immediate replacement for UMNO-PN. Having said that, Pakatan by itself will not be able to displace UMNO Barisan Nasional. And this has been demonstrated amply in the 13th general election. By themselves, they cannot remove this giant.
Anything but UMNO appears to me any means to an end. You suggested the fact that Pakatan was also working for the 40% business interests as well, and that they weren't represented. Use the example of the minimum wage. So you guys were pushing 1,500, UMNO were 900, and Pakatan were 1,100. And also the example that you used about the threat of violence against people who vote, right? So my question to you is, does that mean for the civil liberties movement, does that mean that you take any part towards reducing or challenging the supremacy and dominance of UMNO?
We have tried all civil means that we can conceivably think of. Now, we are confronted today with this. Najib's government does not have the popular vote. And so, Abraham Lincoln's government by the people does not hold sway in Malaysia. Are we expected, therefore, to go into GE14 and face the prospect of a repeat, whilst at the same time we see a fast deteriorating economy? I said this the other day when I was interviewed by Senlam, that if the 40% are prepared to wait out the time to GE14, and in the interim do the necessary work to take an effective shot at removing UMNO-PN, I'll wait. But if their economic conditions will not allow for it, I will still serve them. So I will serve them at the boat, or I will serve them on the streets. We are prepared to, but we've always said we will not take any violent means. But we are tired I was at the Persay 1 rally, Persay 2 rally, Persay 3 rally. I have been at the anti-ISA rallies. I've had enough tear gas inhaled to last me 2 lifetimes. You reach a point where you say you've had enough. That the state authorities should not go on thinking that we will continue at all times to be pacifists. Every person, every polity has its breaking point.
You say that you represent concerns of 40% of the people who are marginalized. My question is, who are this 40%? Where do they come from? You're taking the population as a whole, you're talking regionally, you're talking about, say, for example, some in Semenanjung, some in Sabah and Sarawak. And if so, what is the cementing force that ties the dollars and effectively pay out election time, the type of income we. So now, what is it that's going to coalesce this 40%? And who is going to lead them in the light of what you said, that UMNO was playing the racial card of dividing the rule?
Okay. In terms of profiling, surprisingly, Selangor has a large number, notwithstanding that it's probably the richest state. You have Kelantan, significant numbers, Sabah, Sarawak. But I have to say this, generally, you have pockets of them in all the states. None of the states, in fact, have put in place an effective poverty eradication or alleviation program. We in civil society have launched an social inclusion agenda that we proposed, and we had urged the Pakatan Rakyat Party and to consider implementing, even for now, in their respective states. They are disjointed. I mean, you cannot begin to see them right now as a united force, because the reality is they are not. It's almost akin to each his own. If you went down to the villages, if you went down to the kampongs and you started to speak to them about these issues, essentially they'll tell you, look, I haven't got the time of day because I need to figure out where to get dinner for tonight. It is very disjointed, and this in some ways is the end result of UMNO BN's 40 years of we divide you. Now, if you can imagine the economic pie, and UMNO saying, look, we're taking this portion and we're distributing it to the Malays, and it's not for you to ask how we distribute it. And MCA for the Chinese saying likewise, and MIC for the Indians saying likewise. And it's never, what trickles down is the proverbial breadcrumbs that are tossed from the table. Now, in that situation, even amongst the poor, there is this scramble to see who can get what. And that further serves as a divisive point. So, really to answer your question, at this juncture, we do not have that united 40% force that can count at a rally in Putrajaya. Now, where that leadership can come from, I have to confess that post-13 GE, I have lost confidence that that leadership can come from the opposition parties. And my hope is that someone like Pak Samad might emerge to serve as the moral compass of the nation, or even Kak Ambika, to step forward and who has today really earned the love and respect of so many through the nation, to then begin to tell the opposition parties that if we throw our lot at you, these are the reforms we want. And to reverse the politics that we've been seeing, i.e. the political parties coming to us with this list of promises that more often than not never get delivered. So I don't think that leadership to build this united force can come from the political
Harris, you've mentioned a few times media battle, so I can't help but ask one question on that, and the media battle of taking the truth to the heartlands. I guess it implies a very passive, non-critical audience in the heartlands. If people are poor and there is, the BN is not delivering, why are they not, in your mind, why don't they just ignore them at the mainstream media? But I guess my question is, if this is a media battle, how do you fight that media battle? Is it going to be won in the lessening of the digital divide, or how is it going to be won?
Again, if you take the average Malay in the kampong, rubber small holder, up at 4 o'clock in the morning, down to the small holding, taps his rubber, comes out for his morning prayers, and then over breakfast he's reading Utusan Malaysia. All right, that's his main news for the day. Evening 8 o'clock before his late night prayer, he's getting prime time news. Again, the same race, divide and rule agenda that is presented. After a while, he begins to buy into, he ought to be grateful that his grandson has a place in the university. After a while, he begins to buy into this, that he ought to be thankful for the 2 bags of fertilizer he gets every year. And it translates into, for UMNO, eternal gratitude. Now this is the reality on the ground. And you only begin to get the sense if you take time out to mingle and to understand the mindset. Why is it a battle? Why is it a media battle?
How can it be won?
I said the last round, Abu, we will concede. It was a case of too little, too late. Financial constraint. We worked on contributions from the public. We had an excellent media team that came up with excellent print material, excellent video material. But we could get it in probably once in 2 months because we were strapped for funds. UMNO's message goes in on a daily basis. Every day they are bludgeoned with this misinformation. You can't fight that with a once a fortnight, once in 2 months media exercise. I compare and contrast that with the effort that was admirable effort by Claire Rucastle, Radio Free Sarawak, broadcast from London, shortwave, into the longhouses. If you are familiar with Sarawak, it's a logistical nightmare. As I was explaining to you just now, to get from one longhouse to the other, it's probably 3 days of traveling by boat, by 4-wheel drive, and it is deep into the interior. 31 parliamentary seats. Our intelligence was we could take 8. We took 6. And that is an achievement. And I think Radio Free Sarawak must take a sizable credit for that. They broadcast 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, and our feedback was that in most longhouses, even if the village head, the longhouse head, did not allow it, people were stepping into the forest to listen. So it was effective. Now we need something like that on a sustained basis, but it's going to cost. It's going to cost.
Just a further comment relating to this. The most Malay heartland state in Malaysia is, of course, Kelantan. It hasn't had no government there for a very long time.
Yes.
And indeed, in the last election, the four northern Malaysian states, the opposition vote actually increased.
Yes.
Against that government. UMNO's vote didn't increase at all in the last election.
Yeah.
It did manage to increase the number of seats by 9, so from 79 to 88.
Well, that's in West Malaysia. In West Malaysia.
No, that's a whole lot.
Well, in total, they took 138.
The Barisan National.
Yeah, that's right.
I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay, yes, all right, yes.
79 to 88.
Hmm.
Perak, their vote went down in the state elections there, but yet they managed to win more seats.
Yes,
There are some very suspicious things going on here.
yes, very suspicious.
But the idea that the Malay heartland isn't able to get the message is just something that I find really a bit strange, really, because of this long history of voting against UMNO in many of these areas, and the fact that there is no increase in the UMNO vote.
Now, Kelantan, the Kelantanese Malay, are there any Kelantanese Malays here? The Kelantanese Malay is unique. They have, in fact, one of the major arguments we use in the rallies, with UMNO saying UMNO looks after the Malays. Then the question is, what about the Malays in Kelantan? Because for the last 20 years, they've basically been denied and deprived of all federal development funds. So the Malays in Kelantan are not oblivious to that. And again, like in 1990, when Semangat 46, I think that was the first election when Semangat 46 contested. I was in Kota Bharu. I was one of 6 lawyers who were patrolling the polling stations to see that everything went according to. And now, I saw this myself. Malays coming out from the kampung, and if you're familiar with the sarong, the item of clothing they wear. Now, it's so dirty from long use and without wash that if you took it out, it would stand by itself. You know, it's been stiffened with all that dirt. Barefooted, they came out, they were given 50 ringgit, and they were told that if they came out and they swore on the Quran that they had voted UMNO, they would be given another 50. Now these are the poor. You don't get more poor than this. What they did was they gave back 4 ringgit and said 46, Semangat 46. Now that's the Malay Kelantan. Right? They're a different animal altogether. They love Nik Aziz. They love Nik Aziz, and I can understand why. I've been to his house. The man has not changed in his 20 years as chief minister. Now you go look at Mahathir's house in Country Heights. Both about the Kelantan. It's not just the Kelantanese Malays. The Kelantanese love Nik Aziz. So it's difficult to look at the Kelantan election results and use them as a barometer to see what's happening in the rest of the country. UMNO's Malay vote has not gone up. Yes. But as I said, 20% of the popular vote they took was sufficient to deliver to them 112 seats. It's about knowing where to draw the boundaries. And this is where our concern is now, that come year end, this exercise kicks off again. The popularity with the Malays, for them, just like PAS's popularity has not changed significantly with the Malay vote. Where there's a shift, invariably it benefits Pakatan Rakyat. That's Parti Keadilan Rakyat. UMNO's increase or decrease has not been significant with the Malays. This is why we think it is imperative we identify that 20%. And there has to be this concerted effort to target that 20%. I suppose what we need is a Barack Obama exercise to identify where he is, to go down there and, if you will, deluge them with the necessary information. That's what needs to be done in the next 4 years or so into GE14.
Given all that you've said so far, unless the 40% become a force to be reckoned with, or if the truth reaches the Malay heartlands, as you say, does it mean that GE14 would just be another predetermined lost cause, and would we be stuck with UMNO forever? Thank you.
Yes. Well, really, I mean, the 40% is not a new phenomenon. They have been living with it. But that's simply because they buy into the lies, and they're not getting any alternative information, which is why I'm focusing on the 20% who are giving the 112 seats, because logistically for me it means my burden is lighter. But if we have the resources to galvanize the 40%, quite frankly, many are saying, why wait till GE 14? So again, like I said, I will abide by the trust that the 40% take. If they're prepared to work the next 3 years to level the playing field, I'm game. If they'd like to take Putrajaya next week, I'm game. Well, I'm game to give it a shot.
You mentioned Barack Obama's strategy. It's expensive. It requires a lot of skilled people, and it also mobilized people on the ground. Now, I think one of the strengths of UMNO, Dr. John Paxton has done research on, is that they have people on the ground in each kampong who are known, like it's their relative or the grandfather, who has this moral influence or this respect. Now, assuming that you are able to galvanize Malaysians in large numbers to go and talk to this, to engage these groups of people to overcome this urban-rural divide or this indefinite. Like, how confident are you that having presented this truth, that this group will then sort of see the light and vote in a manner that you hope to?
There are no guilt age guarantees. We can try. And I think at the end of the day, that is all we can do. We can try. I want to share this experience we had. 2 years ago, we launched a DVD, DN or BN, which stands for the end of BN. DN, Barry UMNO, BN 13 GE. It was 7 months work, and it culminated in a 1 hour, 40-minute documentary. Now, several who reviewed it told me, they said, Haris, it's too long. The average Malay in the kampong, and this was the target audience was the Malay in the kampong. They said it's too long. The average uncle in the kampong wouldn't have the time of day. I said, look, you look at it and you tell me which parts to take out. I will take it out. And they did another review and they came back and they said, it's all important. They need to see it all. Okay. So we put it together and we sort of crafted it into 6 parts. We burnt 200,000 copies. Before that, we tested the market in Cemur, that's in Perak. It's a lot of money to spend. We tested the market. About 150 were each given, and we went back a month later to get the feedback. I spoke to some of them, and they were very angry. They were very angry. It had several. I'd be very happy. In fact, if you go to YouTube and you search for that, you'll get the 6 parts. BN, Kuburkan UMNO Barisan Nasional PRU 13. It essentially presented to them the first historical part, so important, that UMNO was not championing the fight for independence. It was the Malay left wing. It was the Burhanuddin Helmis. It was the Tan Cheng Locks. It was the trade unionists. UMNO was working with the British. Now, it got them angry. Now, we also shared with them enough footage that made it abundantly clear that Islam could not countenance the concept of Ketuhanan Melayu. And then they had to choose, were they to be first Muslims or were they to be Ketuhanan Melayu, which was at odds with Islam. And they were angry. Finally, the opulence with which UMNO leaders live. That was portrayed. Now, the feedback we got was, we didn't know. We didn't know. Sungai Siput, Dr. Jayakumar's constituency, we sent them about 500 pieces. They came back and said, not enough. The Malays want more. So, back to your question, I don't think anyone can give guarantees. But what we do is this. We use market research companies. We use market research companies, and we have an exceptionally strong media team. We get that information, we put it together, and we try to have our finger on the pulse of what moves the Malay in the company. And that's about the best we can do.
You've spoken a lot about UMNO and the problems with UMNO. I just want to push you a little bit before we run out of time on the problems of the opposition. What is the fundamental, what you wanted to speak here about not being pro-Pakatan Rakyat. What's the fundamental problem with the opposition? And maybe just one cheeky little question at the end. Do they have a leadership problem? And do you think Anwar Ibrahim really can't hang on until GD14?
Well, this is the problem I had with the opposition leaders. They opt for political expediency rather than doing what's right. Now, take for instance this notion of Ketuanan Melayu, Malay special rights, Malay supremacy. Again and again, UMNO will rely on Article 153 of the Federal Constitution. Now, Article 153 talks about the duty of His Majesty to safeguard, if you will, the special position. There's no special rights. The special position of the Malays, the indigenous of Sabah and Sarawak, and the legitimate expectations of the other communities. It does not create rights. It places a duty on His Majesty to work, if you will, this balancing between the various communities. And if you read the Reid Commission report, that was the commission that actually prepared the draft of this constitution. They recommended that because the Malays would have been in a very disadvantaged position at independence 1957, that perhaps this could be justified to give them, if you will, a leg up. But it was to be reviewed in 15 years. So it was never intended to be ad infinitum, and it created no rights. Now I have tackled the opposition leaders and said, you must go to the Malays and tell them that there is no such thing as special rights for Malays. And the response is, Maris, you're right, but it's not a very popular thing to tell the Malays. So this is the reality that we confront. And I keep telling them, look, I don't go for a beauty contest once in 5 years. You guys do. Give me the platform and I'll tell the Malays that this is the truth. That there is no such thing as special rights. You also must appreciate that the Constitution was promulgated in 1957. In 1948, we had the UDHR, and the backdrop to the UDHR was the Holocaust. Hitler's attempt to create a super race. Now, it's inconceivable that this commission of enlightened gentlemen and ladies would have put in place a clause that would allow UMNO to create a super race. But the politicians on the opposition side then go back to the Malays and say, oi, there is no such thing as special rights for the Malays. Why? They don't want to lose the election. So it's about power and not doing what is right. Sabah and Sarawak, the 1963 Malaysia Agreement that facilitated the creation of the Federation of Malaysia. I've seen some of the documents, and it's difficult to get your hands on all of the documents. I've seen the 20-point agreement that relates to Sabah, that what was intended was they would continue to remain sovereign nations. But that's not what has happened. Today, they are treated as the 12th and 13th states. the Constitution of 1957 was only intended to apply for a short while, whilst a new constitution was drafted. That's not happening. Sabah and Sarawak are having to live with Article 3. Islam is the religion of the Federation. They were guaranteed that Islam would not be the religion of their territory, but it's being subjected. It's being put on them now. Now, I've spoken to the opposition leaders in Sabah and Sarawak. The oil royalty, much of Sabah's oil wealth, is taken out every year. What is given back is 5%. Pakatan offered 20%. Now I said what that meant was Pakatan are smaller thieves than we are. Because the 100% belongs to the people of Sabah. And you can't say, look, we'll give you 20% because they only give you 5%. But the local Sabah leaders were prepared to accept that. Another one said, we'll take 50%. And I said, have you got a mandate from the people to give up 80% or 50% as the case may be? Now this is what we face. It is a quest for power and not necessarily to do what is right. This is the problem we continue to face.
Yeah, just following on a point that Greg made about UMNO having someone in every village. One of the groups that has done a lot of work in sustaining support for UMNO is Wanita UMNO. And much like how UMNO has used the race card to gather support, they've also co-opted a concept of gender equality to advance their cause. When I was in Kuala Lumpur during fieldwork in 2011, most of the urban women I spoke to were going to vote for UMNO. I told Greg this in his New Mandala write-ups. And you know, you had Anwar saying things like we have to get our women's wing more active in the rural areas to countenance the work that Wanita UMNO does there. And after the elections, the Merdeka Centre came out and said that most women voted for UMNO, supported UMNO. So does ABU have a strategy of dealing with that element?
All right. Firstly, let me say, with the greatest respect to Anwar, that there's no truth in this yarn that PKR Wanita is out there in the heartland working to neutralize the work of UMNO Wanita. I agree. In certain constituencies, UMNO Wanita are as efficient as UMNO in dishing out the goodies. Because that's the work they do. It's about dishing out the goodies, the money. All right? There's nothing else. It's got nothing to do with gender equality. It's got nothing. If you want to know which political party perhaps works on that, it is Parti Socialist Malaysia, Dr. Nasir Hashim Hisham, whose work in Kota Damansara, working with the single mothers in low-cost flats in order to empower them. That's the sort of work that PSM works. PKR Wanita, that's news to me. Does ABU have a strategy to tackle what women issues, or to tackle UMNO Wanita?
Oh. Well, just how gender is utilised by UMNO in portraying them as progressives.
I'll have to be honest and say no, and it's simply this. We are strapped for resources in terms of manpower. An issue like that actually requires an entire team by itself to begin to work out a strategy. We don't have that resource. We don't have that resource. It may be something that is worth looking into. I'm grateful that you bring this up today, but I'll say at this juncture, the strategic team has no agenda to look at that issue. I'll take this back though.